Dear brothers and sisters, I welcome you all to hear and see this video message. Today we are going to pray for fertilizer autonomy in India. India importing around 90% of fertilizer material from other countries, and we are giving around 2.5 lakhs crores subsidy to fertilizer industry. That is per hectare that Indian government giving 9,400 subsidy. This should be reduced by 2,000 rupees per hectare by 2030. We should pray for this. This is the second video for fertilizer industry. In this video, I will explain the hurdles in urea production and fertilizer sector growth and fertilizer subsidy burden for our union government. In description, I mentioned it the 44-page content of this our video. You can go through that and study that. Why urea consume more? Historical use and subsidy policies have tilted the balance hugely towards nitrogenous urea, even though there is recommended ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium of 4:2:1 for Indian soil conditions. The ratio was close to ideal in financial year 2009 and 10, but the introduction of nutrient-based subsidy regime for P&K fertilizers in 2010 and the resultant removal of price controls led to a rapid increase in prices of non-urea fertilizers, making urea the preferred fertilizers. In financial year 2021, urea accounted for 58% of the total fertilizer consumption in India, the balance being NPK fertilizers. So the consumption of urea was in a high distorted ratio as the national usage ratio at 6.7 and 2.4 and (1) instead of the desired NPK ratio of 4:2:1. The consumption of nitrogenous fertilizers in India is much higher than that of phosphatic and potassic fertilizers. This is because the cheaper availability of urea as compared to the other fertilizers. Nitrogen use efficiency in India is particularly very low at about 40% against global average of above 50%. The fertilizer consumption of India may double by 2050. There is an urgent need for scientific research to support better nitrogen management in Indian agriculture. Hurdles in urea production. Today, natural gas is a critical feedstock and fuel for urea production and accounts for 70 to 80% of the cost of production. In India, approximately 24.9 MMBtu of natural gas is required to produce 1 metric ton of urea. Urea units are connected to a national grid to ensure supply of gas at a uniform price by pooling the price of domestic gas and imported LNG. Supply of domestic gas to fertilizer plants has dwindled gradually over the years. This has made fertilizer plants more dependent on imported LNG. Supply of domestic gas declined from 10.2 MMS CMD in 2020 and 21 to 8.0 MMS CMD in 2021 and 22. Thus, domestic gas constituted only 17.7% of the total gas consumed during the year. So, India needs to explore more on natural gas resources, efficient mining for economic viable production of urea. Need of P&K fertilizers policy for bilateral and domestic exploration. To manufacturing phosphate and potash fertilizer, our country mainly depends on rock phosphate, which is common key raw material and largely sourced from Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Reserves of Indian rock phosphate are concentrated mainly in Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. Government should speed up investigation of possible potassic resource in Rajasthan, Satipura, Parusari and Lakshakar. Exploration for new reserves and exploitation of existing reserves of domestic phosphate rock also require new efforts. India imports 90% of rock phosphate from other countries. In fiscal 2020, rock phosphate imports was 7.7 million tons. Imports are mainly sourced from Jordan, Togo, Egypt, Peru and Morocco with accounts for over 90% of total imports. We should establish some mechanism which can ensure participation in projects for mining rock phosphate and potash in resource-rich countries and manufacturing of phosphoric acid and finished products for long-term supply security for P&K fertilizers. This will help to realize the joint venture projects and ensure availability and stability in prices in medium and long term. Domestic fertilizer industry with its precarious financial health is not able to invest in mining and manufacturing facilities of phosphate and potash in resource-rich countries which generally needs huge investment. Sovereign guarantee or financial assistance by Indian government can help the domestic industry in acquiring phosphate and potash assets abroad. It will ensure long-term supply security of these nutrients for crops. This aspect has become even more important in view of recent spurt in price of P&K fertilizers and raw materials and constraints in availability of these materials in international market. Chemical fertilizer sector growth. With urbanization reaching all over the country, arable land has seen continuous decline. With the decline in total arable land, India has also seen fragmentation of farmland. This was mainly due to distribution among heirs. The fragmentation of farmland has led to increased crop intensity. More farmers are using different inputs such as fertilizers to achieve the level of output. With same or even lesser arable land, fertilizers will be extensively used. This trend in decline of arable land is expected to continue further, and with this makes the growth in fertilizers industry. In India, per hectare fertilizer consumption for 2020 and 21 stands at 161 kg with a growth of 75% since 2000 and 2001. In 2019 and 20, per hectare fertilizer consumption is 12 states and union territories was more than the national average of 133.4 kg. More than 50% of chemical fertilizer consumed in India are in the form of urea. Between 2001 and 2021, consumption of complex fertilizers grew by 163%. Consumption of diammonium phosphate grew by 103%. Consumption of urea grew by 83% and consumption of muriate of potassium grew by 92%. Consumption of SSP grew by 25% between 2001 and 2019. The India fertilizer market stood at $841.2 billion in 2022 and is projected to register a compounded annual growth rate of 4.7 to reach $1,108.1 billion in 2028. For next 5 years, demand for overall fertilizer is expected to witness a compounded annual growth rate of 1.5 to 2.5% to 68 million tons. Urea is expected to grow at 0.8 to 1.8% of CAGR to 34 to 35 million tons. Non-urea fertilizers are expected to register 2.2 to 3.2% of CAGR to reach 32.5 to 33.5 million tons. Biofertilizer industry expected to grow at CAGR of 13 to 14% fiscal 2021 to fiscal 2024. Growing subsidies for chemical fertilizers, the fiscal burden. Fertilizers are heavily subsidized in India. Since the 1960s, the Indian government has subsidized chemical intensive fertilizer to enhance crop growth. The Indian fertilizer industry sells products to farmers below their cost of production and is eligible for subsidy from the Government of India for notified fertilizers. While it was rupees 83,000 crore during 2019 and 20, which increased to rupees 1.38 lakh crore during 2020 and 21 and to 1.62 lakh crore during 2021 and 22. In the current situation, it is expected to cross 2.5 lakh crore during the current financial year 2022 and 23, which will certainly upset the fiscal balance on the union government. Fertilizer in second highest in terms of subsidy after food. This has led to a high fiscal deficit. In 2020 and 21, the subsidy turned out to be rupees 9,400 per hectare of net sown area, while it ranged between rupees 5,000 and 6,000 during 2016 and 20. In 2019 and 20, over 2/3 of the total subsidy was for urea and 1/3 was for phosphatic and potassic fertilizer. But for city composite, only a negligible for 0.04% of total subsidy on fertilizer was provided. Per hectare, fertilizer consumption in India has been increasing. It was 92 kg per hectare in 2001 and rose to 161 kg per hectare in 2021, marking a growth of 75%. Heavy government subsidy for chemical fertilizers have fueled their high usage compared to non-chemical fertilizers. Government has declared fertilizer as an essential commodity. Fertilizers are a non-strategic sector. Every public sector unit in the fertilizer sector can't survive without government subsidy. Industry is not able to bring new fertilizer products based on research in India because of heavy subsidy being extended to specified products. This automatically prohibits commercialization of newer and innovative products which will give higher crop yields with lesser inputs. Urea has a substantial share in the overall subsidy. In 2020, over 2/3 of the total subsidy was designated only for urea. Of the remaining subsidy, about 1/3 was nutrient-based subsidy for phosphatic and potassic fertilizers. For phosphatic and potassic fertilizers, subsidy is fixed at rupees 18.8 per kg of nitrogen nutrient and rupees 45.3 per kg of phosphorus nutrient and rupees 10.1 per kg of potassium nutrient and 2.4 kg of sulfur nutrient. But only a negligible for 0.04% of the subsidy was earmarked for the city composite and organic fertilizer. Urea is a highly subsidized commodity up to 90% of the global prices, with a bag costing a farmer rupees 266 and the government of India rupees 3000. Natural gas is used as a feedstock and fuel in the urea sector, forming 70 to 80% of the cost of production of urea. Out of the 32 urea plants in India, 29 are gas based. The total gas consumption of all these plants was 42.2 million metric cube by D in 2020, out of which about 17.3 M3 by D is being supplied through domestic sources and the rest through imported or LNG. For financial year 2020, the share of RLNG is 59%. This leads to a higher urea production cost and hence a higher subsidy burden for the Government of India and industry. With the implementation of a fixed subsidy regime as part of the NPS mechanism, retail prices of phosphatic and potassic fertilizer including DAP were decontrolled in 2020. However, the DAP subsidy increased to 60% of the cost in financial year 2022, up from a little more than 30% previously. Currently, anybody can purchase any quantity of fertilizer through point of scale machines. There is a limit of 100 bags per transaction, but no limit is placed on the number of transactions. This enhances the diversion of fertilizers toward unintended beneficiaries. Besides agriculture, urea is also used in industries such as plywood resins, crockery, dairy and cattle feed. Also, only 35% of the total fertilizer subsidies reach small farmers. The rest leaks out to the black market, large farmers and inefficient producers. The fertilizer subsidy should be paid directly into the farmer's account. It can also take the form of income support. This will give farmers the choice to buy the inputs including fertilizers which are more suitable for their crops. The subsidies are like a dole to the farmer. It is saving his body but destroying its spirit. The ultimate solution is to make agriculture more lucrative and remunerative, which would gradually lead to the withdrawal of subsidies and relieve the government of their fiscal burden. Rationalization of fertilizer subsidies. Price subsidies have formed an important part of anti-poverty policies in India, but have not transformed the lives of the poor. Price subsidies are regressive, meaning richer households benefit more than poorer households. The subsidies benefit manufacturers the most, not poor farmers. The economic survey stressed on cutting back of price subsidies by using technology as a means to block leakages. To cut leakages in the subsidies or not cut the subsidies itself. Instead of subsidizing fertilizer, especially urea plants, and keeping the price of urea abnormally lower than the market dictated prices, the government can simply transfer cash to farmers equivalent to the current fertilizer subsidy. It will help the state to offer subsidy support to poor households in a targeted and less destructive way. This will lead to a huge saving by simply stopping the diversion of urea for non-agricultural uses and to other countries. But a small farmer is not a cash-rich person. For him to come with a full cost of fertilizer and get it reimbursed later in a painful thing. For 1 hectare, the non-subsidies cost would around rupees 20,000 rupees. Even if transfer the subsidy within a same day, it is difficult for the farmer. So subsidy cut and reduce the subsidy should be in a phased manner.